From political battles to business betrayals, power struggles to cage matches, today we're gonna talk about billionaires who hate each other, starting with the twins who got screwed over by a sociopath but ended up getting rich anyway. In the fall of 2003, Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss and their friend Divya needed a web developer for their Harvard students-based social network called HarvardConnection.com. They reached out to a young campus celebrity named Mark Zuckerberg, who had risen to notoriety by making a Hot or Not clone for Harvard students. Mark agreed to build their project, and the four would have a meeting at a Harvard dining hall. The three upperclassmen explained to little Zuck their outline for the social network, plans for expanding to other schools around the country, and the importance of getting there first. Mark never even started HarvardConnection.com. Instead, he strung them on for months while working on his own nearly identical social network. Leaked messages would later reveal that Mark had been bragging to his friends about his plan to screw them over from the very beginning. So have you decided what you're gonna do about Harvard Connection? Yeah, I'm gonna f them. Probably in the ear. He would also later boast about hacking into the twins' social network, which they renamed to Connect You, where he created a fake profile for Cameron Winklevoss, pretending to be a white supremacist. Ethnicity? Better than you. Favorite music? The sound of myself
meat smoking.
Favorite quote? Mark released the Facebook in 2004 to the shock of Divya and the Winklevoss twins.
He's a guy who had success because he's unethical. He completely handcuffed us and took advantage of us and defrauded us.
They would later sue Mark for ripping off their idea, winning a $65 million settlement. The Winkle Bros took the money and did what any normal people would do. YOLO'd into Bitcoin and became multi-billionaires. So both sides got a happy ending, unlike this next, much more violent feud that shows what happens when money faces off against power. In 1995, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Khodorkovsky acquired Yukos, a massive conglomerate accounting for a fifth of all the oil produced in Russia. Within a few years, he was the richest man in the country, and everything seemed to be going his way. He bought a gated compound with 7 houses. He took trips in his private jet, but his high life as a Russian oligarch would soon come to a violent end. After acquiring the Russian presidency in 1999, Vladimir Putin started consolidating power and cracking down on any opposition that would challenge him. To the wealthy Russian oligarchs, he gave a clear message: obey my rules and stay out of politics. This order was never an official law, just a very strong recommendation. While most oligarchs followed their self-preservation instincts and complied with Putin's orders, Khodorkovsky did the exact opposite. In an effort to put Russia onto a better path, he began speaking out against corruption and making contributions to Putin's opposition. But on February 19, 2003, he would make a severe lapse in his judgment. In a televised meeting between Putin and top Russian businessmen, Khodorkovsky made the bizarre decision to call Putin out directly.
Масштабы коррупции в России, оцениваемые экспертами 4 организаций, приблизительно одинаковые, в районе 30 миллиардов оценивается долларов.
Putin's response would seal Khodorkovsky's fate.
Так, например, компания Юкос имеет сверхзапасы. Как она их получила? Может быть, именно поэтому в налоговую академию 4-5 человек идут.
In case you missed it, Putin just used his classic "no you," sarcastically accusing Khodorkovsky of profiting off tax evasion schemes. And if you ever decide to roast an all-powerful dictator straight to his face and he starts looking at you like this, you're cooked. Khodorkovsky was arrested 8 months later, facing a trial for tax evasion and fraud. The accusations against him were nonsensical. His tax burden was higher than the total amount that Yukos earned, and he was being charged with laws that were only criminalized after they were supposedly committed. Putin threw the book at Khodorkovsky before he'd even finished writing it. Even worse, all of Mikhail's associates started dropping like flies. His business partners were getting arrested, along with his lawyers, one of which was threatened into making falsely incriminating accusations against him. After a drawn-out performance in court, a man dressed up like a judge would officially send Mikhail to prison. A few years prior, the multi-billionaire was on top of the world. Now he was getting stabbed in the face from an organized attack in a prison colony while his company was going bankrupt.
Используя абсолютно легальные рыночные механизмы, обеспечивает свои интересы. Считаю это вполне нормально.
In 2009, Khodorkovsky was eligible for parole, but instead of being freed, he would face a second trial. He was now being accused of stealing 350 million tons of oil from Yukos. Russia's best lawyers said that laws were being passed specifically to keep Khodorkovsky locked up. Even Barack Obama called it odd. But like I said before, this face, you're cooked.
Что касается Ходорковского, то считаю, что вор должен сидеть в тюрьме.
Khodorkovsky was locked back up immediately. But 4 years later, Putin unexpectedly set him free, citing his mother's illness. Putin cleaning up his image before the 2014 Sochi Olympics might have also been an added plus. Since his release, Khodorkovsky has wisely chosen to stay the fuck away from Russia. His company Yukos was totally dissolved shortly after his arrest, but in 2016 he regained access to $100 million worth of assets that were being held for him in Ireland, money that he now uses to fund Russian opposition efforts. He continues to speak out against Putin and bring international attention to corruption. Maybe Putin made a mistake by letting Khodorkovsky free, because if you ever send someone to jail and they start looking at you like this, you're cooked. But there is one man who is more powerful, more deadly, and more feared than Vladimir Putin. So I'm assuming you're not much of a Swiftie, given the thumbnail you clicked on to get here. So let me get you up to speed on who this person is. Taylor Swift is the white woman's Martin Luther King. The US Army has 450,000 active duty personnel. Taylor Swift mobilizes that on a weekend. Given Taylor's military might, it only makes sense that a rivalry between her and a billionaire music executive would result in a total war, as well as one of the most significant events in music history. In 2005, a 15-year-old Taylor Swift signed her first contract. Big Machine Records CEO Scott Borchetta handed Taylor a six-figure advance in exchange for the masters of her first 6 albums, which control how the songs are used and who profits. Corporations throwing checks at broke people to seize the ownership of their work is usually called employment. But Taylor Swift called it exploitation. After chart-topping albums and record-breaking tours, in 2018 her contract expired, and she reached out to Scott with one request. She wanted her masters back. Scott's response offer was that Taylor could earn one album back at a time for each new one she turned in, essentially using her art as a carrot on the stick. It was around this time when Taylor started to truly regret walking into that room at the age of 15. Ain't no contract like a Borchetta contract. Taylor refused Scott's new deal and instead signed with Universal. Scott then sold Big Machine Records for $300 million, and with it, Taylor's masters. This was Taylor's worst case scenario, not because her masters were sold, but because of who they were sold to. Scooter Braun was a talent manager behind names like Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, and Kanye West, the last of which had not good blood with Taylor ever since their legendary 2009 award show disaster. The two would later make amends until 2016 when Kanye dropped Famous, a song where he referenced Taylor by saying that he made that bitch famous and putting a naked lookalike of her in his music video. All of this was backed by Scooter Braun. Taylor saw Scooter as the last person she would ever want owning all of her music, so the day that the news dropped about his acquisition, she made that bitch famous. In a viral Tumblr post, Taylor rallied her army against Scooter, claiming she was a victim of his incessant manipulative bullying for years. Scott Borchetta wasn't safe either.
I knew he would sell my music. I knew he would do that. I couldn't believe who he sold it to, because we've had endless conversations about Scooter Braun, and he has 300 million reasons to conveniently forget those conversations.
Taylor's army mobilized instantly. They launched a blitzkrieg on Scooter Braun's DMs, prompting him to release an open letter pleading for mercy in the face of death threats towards his family. He also politely asked Taylor to stop ghosting him so they could actually work something out. Taylor would respond by doubling down on his head at an award show 1 month later.
After I was denied the chance to purchase my music, my entire catalog was sold to Scooter Braun's Ithaca Holdings, and of course, Scooter never contacted me or my team to discuss it prior to the sale. I'm fairly certain he knew exactly how I would feel about it, though.
I think we live in a time of toxic division and people thinking that social media is the appropriate place to air out on each other and not have conversations.
The fact is that private equity is what enabled this man to think, according to his own social media post, that he could buy me. But I'm obviously not going willingly.
Artists began taking sides, but Swift's allies far outnumbered Scooter's. She would even find an unlikely supporter in Kanye West.
This is something that is very important to you, and you've also said that you're planning on re-recording some of your music. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true, and it's something that I'm very excited about doing because my contract says that next year I can record albums 1 through 5 all over again, so
And you'll do that.
I'm very excited about it.
On April 9th of 2021, Fearless, Taylor's version, was released. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard, and the original Fearless dropped 20% in sales and fell off the charts. Her next 2 re-recorded albums followed a similar trend, and the Taylor's version of 1989 would outsell the original. This wasn't the first time an artist had re-recorded albums to gain control of their work, but thanks to the Swifties, it was the most successful, and it served to challenge the status quo of the music industry. Taylor has inspired artists to fight for ownership, but she's also inspired record labels to fight against re-recordings by using harsher terms in their employment contracts. But business is about leverage, and if you have a fan base long enough, you can move the earth. Taylor and Scooter are totally different, unlike these next two billionaires who have one very strange thing in common. Legendary conqueror Genghis Khan once said, "It is not sufficient that I succeed. Everyone else must fail." This philosophy of carnage is one held by many a billionaire, but Larry Ellison is the only one to admit it.
Genghis Khan said, he said, "It's not sufficient I succeed, everyone else must fail."
In 2000, Larry Ellison hired private investigators to go through Bill Gates' trash in order to dig up dirt on his competitor Microsoft, who was facing an antitrust case after wiping out other internet browsers. Ellison claimed that he was doing a public service.
Bill and I used to be friends a long time ago. That's before he turned mean and ran Netscape out of business. I think what Bill did to Netscape was appalling.
What has Mr. Gates said when you've spoken to him personally? Bill and I don't talk much personally anymore.
In 2001, Microsoft lost their case, and Bill Gates was sentenced to a finger wag. Larry Ellison won the battle, but lost the war. But after years of conflict, Ellison and Gates have both gone from Genghis to Gandhi, bonding over their shared interests in technology, philanthropy, and dumpster diving.
You lift me into one of those huge garbage bins.
Bill and I would actually dive in the dumpsters to try to find listings of the secret inner code of the operating system. That's how passionate we were.
And in the very bottom of a dumpster is where you'll find the relationship between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, which started out on a catastrophic note in 2016, when Elon's company SpaceX attempted to launch a $200 million Facebook satellite into space.
As I'm here in Africa, I'm deeply disappointed to hear that SpaceX's launch failure destroyed our satellite.
Yeah, my fault for being an idiot. Elon's humbleness did not last.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, Donald John Trump.
In 2018, the Cambridge Analytica scandal revealed that millions of Facebook users' personal data had been harvested in an attempt to influence elections. In response, Elon would delete the SpaceX and Tesla Facebook pages, saying the platform gave him the willies. Zuck was silent. 2 years later, under a tweet criticizing Zuckerberg's oligarchical control over information, Musk would tell people to #delete Facebook, it's lame. Zuck remained silent. A year later, Elon would link the January 6th Capitol riots to Facebook misinformation. Not a peep from Zuck. In 2023, Facebook released their Twitter clone, Threads. Elon took a few sarcastic shots at Zuck, then a random person would warn him that Zuck apparently does jujitsu now. Elon would then reply, "I'm up for a cage match, if he is." LOL.
Send me location.
Zuck had been training. In 2020, he began learning to fight. A few years later, he went undercover and won his first tournament. He started doing intense fitness challenges and training with professional athletes. Despite a lack of physical fitness, Elon was confident that he would win the fight for one simple reason.
I'm way bigger than him. This is unfair. I don't think you should fight me.
Because you're so much bigger than him?
Yeah, I'm like 50% heavier than him. I've got my patented walrus move. I just lie on him.
Elon started training in his office. He would even live stream himself preparing to murder the Zuck.
This is me, curling a 45.
But just like Elon Musk, Zuck doesn't play any games. I'm ready today. I suggested August 26th when he first challenged, but he hasn't confirmed. Not holding my breath. What followed was excuse after excuse from Elon. First, he would say he was unsure of a date because of a surgery. He would then ask Zuck for a practice match at his house, which Zuck would decline. Elon would pull up to his house anyway.
I tried going to his house, actually.
Did you really?
Yeah, because he lives in Palo Alto. I just thought it was funny to go like, I'm coming over to your house. I'm gonna get you. Anyway, he didn't answer.
Elon kept up his taunts.
I'll fight Zuckerberg any place, anytime, any rule.
But Zuck knew he wasn't serious. As the chances of the billionaire brawl fizzled out, Zuck's metamorphosis into an alpha male was complete.
What if there was like real consequences on the line? Like what if you guys had a real bet?
Okay, sure.
Like the moderation team from X takes over moderation of Facebook if you win.
No problem, sounds good. It's a fight for civilization.
Yeah, a literal fight for civilization.
I mean, I'll do it.
Elon definitely would have lost that cage fight, let's be honest. But in the fight for civilization, Elon has Zuck in the walrus. I'll be explaining Elon and Trump's historical beef later on in this video, but right now there's one thing about their relationship that most people are completely missing out on, and I'm gonna let my first ever sponsor, Ground News, show us what it is. Right now, there is a battle over how stories are being told, and it's making us more divided.
What Musk is doing is illegal and unconstitutional. We are giving Mr. Musk a medal.
Ground News is here to fix that by gathering thousands of sources from around the world and breaking down every story by bias, factuality, and ownership. Look at when Elon started dismantling USAID. On the Ground News app or website, we can see that over 500 sources reported on this, with 48% being centered. But looking at the headlines is where you see the narrative being shaped. The right says that smoking the US aid pack was necessary to cut wasteful spending. Comparing this to headlines from the left, which highlight Elon's overreach of power, shows you how reporting bias can shape our reality. You can even see the ownership of each publication and factuality ratings from 3 independent organizations. But you're not seeing the full picture until you check their blind spot feed, which shows you stories that each side tends to ignore. Look, this dude's been in office for 1 month, and we already have talks of a coup, people shouting in the streets, and a teenager named Big Balls inserting himself in the back end of the US government. Headlines are getting more and more divisive, so I think if there's any time to take off your media blinders, it would be now. Go to ground.news/pockets or scan this QR code and you'll get 40% off their Vantage plan, which is the one I've been using. That works out to $5 a month. So for 1 egg per month, you'll get a better way to stay informed about all the crazy stuff going on and all the crazy stuff that is bound to happen. Crazy stuff was definitely bound to happen in this next beef, which ended up in an $8 billion disaster and both guys being sent to prison. In 2019, CZ, founder of the world's largest crypto exchange Binance, invested $25 million into a smaller exchange called FTX. Its young founder Sam Bankman-Fried was well known for presenting himself like a 5th grader, driving a shitty car, and playing video games during meetings. This apparently made him a genius. CZ describes Sam in his early days as very humble, but soon his ego would start to show. In 2021, Sam would cut business ties with CZ, buying out his stake with $2 billion worth of cash and FTT tokens, which were FTX-created crypto coins. Giving these coins to CZ would turn out to be a terrible mistake, but Sam, despite being a genius, would never see this coming. See, FTX was quickly becoming a household name, thanks to celebrity endorsements, Super Bowl ads, and high-profile sponsorships. But Sam's plan for total market control was through his close relationship with regulators. Using official meetings and legalized bribery, Sam positioned himself to receive preferential treatment from the law. But it wasn't sufficient for FTX to succeed. Sam wanted everyone else to fail. Behind closed regulatory doors, Sam would start talking shit about who he saw as his main competitor, Binance, trying his hardest to paint the exchange that was once his friend as an untrustworthy Chinese company. Thanks to potential regulatory risk, CZ was forced to sit on the sidelines and watch his name get slandered. Sam would then pour salt on Binance's wounds. Excited to see CZ repping the industry in DC going forward. He is allowed to go to DC, right? CZ's response to this would destroy Sam's entire life. 3 days after the snarky tweet, a crypto site exposed that most of FTX's assets consisted of FTT tokens, the crypto coins that FTX itself printed out of thin air, the same crypto coins that CZ happened to have a market-shifting amount of. A few days later, CZ announces that Binance will be selling off all their FTT. What followed was the greatest disaster in crypto history. FTX had been backed by nothing, and now that nothing was crashing. As people started rushing to get their money out, FTX started scrambling. Sam's side piece Caroline Ellison attempted to minimize market impact by offering to buy Binance's FTT, but CZ refused, saying he wouldn't support people who lobby against other industry players behind their backs. In a last-ditch effort to save himself, Sam reached out to CZ begging for help. What resulted was a non-binding agreement for Binance to acquire FTX. It seemed like CZ had just pulled the most devious business play of all time, crushing his main competitor just to acquire him for pennies on the dollar. But what CZ ended up doing was even more devious. After taking one look at FTX's balance sheet, he backed out of the deal and hit a crying emoji. Sam went to prison for 25 years. But there's one last twist. After Sam realized that FTX was done for, he had posted a cryptic tweet. At some point, I might have more to say about a particular sparring partner, so to speak, but you know, glass houses. So for now, all I'll say is, well played, you won. He was obviously referring to CZ, but what were the other things that he had to say? The answer may have come 2 years later, when Binance was charged with violating US money laundering laws and CZ was sentenced to 4 months in prison. But CZ got to keep most of his money. Sam Bankman-Fried, despite being a genius, wasn't so lucky. My boy Sam isn't the only billionaire to lose it all. This next beef is another story of riches to rags, except this time it's a lot more personal. After Dhirubhai Ambani died without a will in 2002, he left behind a $15 billion empire named Reliance Industries. His two sons, Mukesh and Anil, immediately started fighting over their father's legacy. After 3 years of brotherly squabbling, Mom intervened. She split the family business in two. Mukesh got the older industrial side, while Anil got the newer telecom, power, and finance sectors. One brother would become the richest man in Asia. The other would lose everything and end up with a $0 net worth. Initially, both Ambanis would find success. Mukesh focused on slow but steady expansion, while Anil took higher risks in higher growth sectors. By 2008, Anil was the 6th richest man in the world, with a $42 billion net worth. His 2008 IPO of Reliance Power was the biggest in India's history. He acquired a $1 billion stake in Steven Spielberg's production company DreamWorks, and started throwing lavish parties with Bollywood celebrities, one of which he married. But despite all his success, he wasn't happy. Because having $42 billion isn't cool when your older brother has 43. Mukesh liked to work in silence. He preferred family nights to elite parties, mystery to media tours. But despite his efforts to stay under the radar, he would face nationwide attention in 2009, when an argument between him and Anil would threaten the Indian economy. It was over a deal they made back when Reliance split, allowing Anil to purchase gas from Mukesh at a discount. Mukesh argued that the price was too low. Anil accused Mukesh of trying to back out of their legally binding contract for unfair financial gain. Whoever won this argument stood to gain $20 billion. The Indian Petroleum Minister initially sided with Mukesh, prompting Anil to publicly accuse his own brother of secret dealings with the government. He started taking out newspaper ads against Mukesh, where he would label the move as one of corporate greed and corruption. The brothers were still living together at the time, but there was no conversation. Sometimes they were forced to shake hands, but they did not look at each other. Thanks to their brotherly squabbling, a massive power plant Anil planned to build was put on hold, which extended riot-inducing electricity outages. International investors began getting spooked, keeping their money far away from Indian oil and gas fields. The Indian finance minister was now begging the brothers to squash their beef, because it was becoming a matter of national interest. In a public statement, Anil would do some begging of his own, claiming he had made a pilgrimage to a holy shrine to seek divine blessings. $20 billion will make a man go to church. In May 2010, the Supreme Court of India ruled in Mukesh's favor. Anil lost billions of dollars. That same month, an old non-compete between the brothers was scrapped, and Mukesh saw this as an opportunity to attack his brother in the telecom sector. In 2016, he launched Reliance Jio with free voice calls and ultra-cheap data, and within 2 years, he had pushed his brother's company Arcom out of business. Anil's bets in the entertainment space would also underperform and cost him hundreds of millions. In 2020, facing a lawsuit for over $700 million in unpaid loans, Anil tells a UK court that his net worth is zero. At that same time, Mukesh's net worth was $57 billion, making him the richest man in Asia. But there was a catch. Rich people have a very different definition of broke than broke people. At the same time he revealed his $0 net worth, Anil had a $3 million car collection, a $56 million yacht, a private jet, and a helicopter. Anil got up on the stand, claimed poverty, then drove home in an S-Class. He started getting called out for his hypocrisy in the courts of law and public opinion, but against all odds, he's been starting to revive his businesses. But he's got a lot of catching up to do. Mukesh has the largest public company in India, a $2 billion house, and a will.
My name is Bill Gates. I'm chairman of Microsoft, and during 1984, Microsoft expects to get half of its revenues from Macintosh software.
In 1984, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were working together on the Macintosh. At the time, Gates held Apple in high regard. At one point, he apparently had more people working on the Mac than Jobs did. Steve and Billy would have regular brainstorming meetings in Cupertino, California, and it seemed like the two young entrepreneurs would be long-term partners. But their blossoming relationship would fall apart the very next year. In 1985, Microsoft released Windows 1, a graphical user interface that featured mouse interaction, clickable icons, and resizable windows for multitasking, all of which were features that eerily resembled Apple's Macintosh System 1 that was released the previous year. Steve lost his shit. He instantly accused Gates of ripping off his idea. Gates responded that Apple had ripped off the idea from another company. This hit a nerve with Steve because it was true. The two were rivals ever since, but their conflict mainly stemmed from one key difference between them. Bill had book smarts, but Steve had traveled to India to find spiritual enlightenment smarts. Bill would take digs at Steve's lack of technical abilities, while Steve would knock Bill's lack of vision. At one point saying Bill would be a broader guy if he had gone off to an ashram when he was younger or dropped acid once. Bill must have gotten the wrong batch.
The only problem with Microsoft is they just have no taste. I don't mean that in a small way, I mean that in a big way. They don't think of original ideas, and they don't bring much culture into their product. I am saddened not by Microsoft's success. They've earned their success, for the most part. I have a problem with the fact that they just make really third-rate products.
In 2006, Bill Gates stepped back from Microsoft to focus on philanthropy, and Jobs saw this as an opportunity to get the last word. Bill is basically unimaginative and has never invented anything, which is why I think he's more comfortable now in philanthropy than technology. He just shamelessly ripped off other people's ideas. But despite Gates being out of the scene, the two feuding billionaires would have one last confrontation.
What's the greatest misunderstanding in your relationship and about each other? This idea of catfight, this idea of which one of the many?
Well, we've kept our marriage secret for over a decade now.
No, it's been fun to work together. And I actually kind of miss some of the people aren't around anymore. You know, people come and go in this industry. It's nice when somebody sticks around. And
when Bill and I first met each other and worked together in the early days, generally we were both the youngest guys in the room. And now when we're working at our respective companies, I don't know about you, but I'm the oldest guy in the room most of the time. You know, I think of most things in life as either a Bob Dylan or a Beatles song. But there's that one line in that one Beatles song, you and I have memories longer than the road that stretches out ahead. And that's clearly true here.
But in the land of billionaires, all roads lead to one man. Elon Musk's time management doesn't make any sense, because how can a man possibly work 120-hour weeks, tweet 100 times a day, impregnate one woman a month, and still somehow find a way to be a full-time hater? Elon clowned Bill Gates after finding out about his $500 million short position against Tesla. Then when Gates bought an electric Porsche, Elon said their conversations have always been underwhelming. Elon's beef with space race rival Jeff Bezos mainly consists of Elon making fun of Jeff's phallic rockets, while Jeff focuses on launching legal cases against Elon. But now they seem to be cool. Former CEO of Disney, Michael Eisner, was one of the first people to show up to the Tesla Roadster unveiling in 2006. But now Elon's telling the current CEO of Disney to
go fuck yourself,
after he removed ads from Elon's social media platform X, the same platform Elon used to compare billionaire political activist George Soros to a cartoon villain.
In my opinion, he fundamentally hates humanity.
Elon believes that Soros's progressive policies are a threat to society, as well as his attempts to control media and influence elections. Elon Musk and Google co-founder Larry Page were longtime friends until Musk's 44th birthday party, where they had an argument about AI. Despite having paralyzed vocal cords, Larry somehow ended up yelling at Elon, calling him a speciesist for favoring humans over AI.
And I'm like, what team are you on, Larry?
After seeing Larry's lack of caution, Elon cut him off and started his own AI company with co-chair Sam Altman. But internal conflicts caused Elon to leave, and the two billionaires have been feuding ever since.
He's also clearly a bully who clearly likes to get in fights.
But Elon had one beef that took a turn no one would expect. In 2016, Elon had a falling out with his father over his support of Donald Trump.
Elon said Trump is evil. Very matter of fact, he said, look, he's evil. You know, get it into your head.
At the time, Elon was a flaming Democrat, and he publicly denounced Trump's character before the election. After Trump took office, he invited Elon to join an advisory council. Elon would reluctantly accept, but he clarified on Twitter that his motive was to promote sustainable energy and protest Trump's Muslim ban, and that his attendance didn't imply his support. A few months later, Elon would leave the council after Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. But soon, thanks to COVID crackdowns, Biden's decision not to invite Tesla to the White House's EV summit, and his daughter's transition after catching the woke mind virus, Elon's political views began to shift. In 2022, Elon announced that he voted for Texas Representative Mayra Flores, and it was the first time he ever voted Republican. This pissed off Donald Trump.
You know, he said the other day, oh, I've never voted for a Republican. I said, I didn't know that. He told me he voted for me. So he's another bullshit artist.
At the time, Elon was in a legal dispute over his potential acquisition of Twitter, and Trump would roast that too.
Elon is not going to buy Twitter. He's got a pretty rotten contract. I looked at his contract, not a good contract, but he's not. Sign up for truth.
Elon would respond by saying it's time for Trump to hang up his hat and sail into the sunset. He also raised concerns about Trump's age. Trump responded by dropping a nuke on Elon. When Elon Musk came to the White House asking me for help on all of his many subsidized projects, whether it's electric cars that don't drive long enough, driverless cars that crash, or rocket ships to nowhere, without which subsidies he'd be worthless, and telling me how he was a big Trump fan and Republican, I could have said drop to your knees and beg, and he would have done it. A year later, Elon would continue his criticisms of Trump.
I would prefer just a normal person as president. Yeah. A normal person with common sense.
But a turning point came after the assassination attempt.
Where is he? Come on up here, Elon. Come here. Take over, Elon. Yes, take over.
We had one president who couldn't climb a flight of stairs, and another who was fist pumping after getting shot.
I will create a government efficiency commission tasked with conducting a complete financial and performance audit of the entire federal government. And Elon, because he's not very busy, has agreed to head that task force.
Your money is being wasted, and the Department of Government Efficiency is going to fix that.
After a $280 million campaign, Elon got his role as the leader of the Department of Government Efficiency. But the memories between Elon and Trump are much shorter than the road that stretches out ahead.
I tell you what, Elon is not going to buy Twitter. Nah, he's got himself a mess. You know, he said the other day, oh, I've never voted for a Republican. I said, I didn't know that. He told me he voted for me. So he's another bullshit artist, but he's not going to be buying it. He's not going to be buying it. Although he might later. Who the hell knows what's going to happen?